Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day three of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. We have with us this morning Dave Boswick, who's the Associate Director for the School of Journalism and Strategic Media at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. A Razorback.
I did
Yeah.
not. I
Are
did
you
not.
are you going to give us the 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 cheer? No, the woo pig
I
woo.
mean, if it goes really well, maybe at the end. How about that?
He also coordinates the school's online journalism courses. Uh, he's going to talk to us today about adding power to OER through interactive content. So, Dave, take it away. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much. I don't give a lot of remote presentations, so but I think we've got everything working correctly. So pop me in the chat if there's something that's not functioning correctly, and so we'll move forward. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about today about these topics, the open educational resources and what they are, very briefly, what learning management systems can, how they can incorporate OER. And in our case, so the examples will be a Blackboard, but I think you can extend that out. It feels compulsory to cover a little bit on AI's potential role. So I'll do a little bit with that. And then we'll discuss options, implications, and questions. Feel free. I don't have this timed or anything, so feel free. And there's stuff that, I don't have to cover every slide. If you've got questions and we want to go take a detour down a particular path, that's fine with me. Just say something or pop it in the chat and we can look at these things. So I like to start a lot of my presentations with a picture of my grandmother. She played the piano for silent movies in Canada, actually.
You got to
So,
share.
pardon?
You got to. We don't see your grandmother.
Oh, it's not okay.
Yeah, got to share that.
Let me try to. Is that working now?
No,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. Just you had it
Let me,
earlier. I mean,
let me
we
stop
can.
sharing and share again and see if that makes a difference.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't like something we did previously. Okay. So my grandmother played the piano for the silent movies in Canada, actually. And she lost her job when talking movies came. And I like to use that as an example of how the history of mass media is the history of disruptive technology. And I say that in an education conference because education has always relied heavily on mass media and mass media technology. So I like to tell my students we're always here with, you think AI is new. We've never had anything like that before. We've always been there with some kind of disruptive technology changing the way we deliver what we teach and how we communicate with mass audiences. So wanted to share a little bit about me. Back in the day, when I was in my 20s, I was going to be an international rock star. I had a lot more hair. We filled in circles on scannable exam sheets. We wrote essays in blue books. I can't believe we did this, but back when I was in college, would just find grades by having your social security number and then put your grade alongside it. It was a yeah, wow, I can't believe we did that back then, but that's the way things wrote. I never planned on writing OER text. I wanted to write rock songs, but we all kind of meander our way through our careers. So, but by teaching mass media over the years, I've observed a lot of these changes. And I think maybe I can put them in perspective, what's going on right now. Um, so part of what I'm going to discuss today has been heavily influenced by an article I read in the Chronicle of Higher Education about asking whether this is the end of reading. So students may be coming to college a little less willing to read, whether this is pandemic related or just a trend that was already started is a research question. Um, and it's not just universities that are facing this, it's every place. One study cited in this article of the Chronicle of Higher Education suggested that only 20% of students normally completed required course reading. And that's going to go not just into education, but also into corporate training, things like that. If you're just making a book, an online text that people are expected to read, they may or may not read it. There's a chance they won't, or that they won't process it well. So, and the article said, essentially suggested that we're shifting towards shorter writing, more emphasis on audio and video, so that this is kind of the end. And I've read several pieces about this. We're gradually coming possibly to the end of the printing press era and more into the era of video, audio, and multimedia. Who knows, 100 years from now, somebody can probably put this in better perspective. Um, but some quotes from this article: if you design a class based on the assumption that students will do the readings, you'll get nowhere. But if you make it easier and go over what they should have read in class, they'll participate, but you're really just entertaining. So that to me is, a problem for both in college education and beyond any training atmospheres. So maybe we need to prepare ourselves for a drastically different future, that the future of higher ed and especially higher ed technology is not going to look as much like the past. So I've written three interactive OER texts and at the end, if I remember, I can share the links to these. But if you were to go to davebostwick.net, you'd go to a really, really primitive web page that's hand coded, but it's just to provide the links for some of my projects for presentations. So if you want to sample those, you'll see things to those three. And in fact, let me see if I can pop something in the chat here for you. And see if I can make that work. And so you can explore those and tinker with those if you want. And the chapters, actually, if you go to the upper left, you can go to all the chapters. I just put some chapters in there as examples. But we can discuss a little bit about what some people don't understand what an open educational resource is. So it's learning materials that are freely available to reuse, adapt, redistribute. When I write these, I essentially give up, I have the copyright technically, but anybody can take it and adapt it. Somebody could have their own OER and use a chapter of mine. They just need to let me know that they're doing that. But it's freely available, not just to use, but to adapt and redistribute. Somebody could take my work and rewrite it, rework it. They reside in the public domain, so there's kind of an open copyright. That's the whole point. And then it does not, most people just think of textbooks, but it's also curriculum guides, tests, multimedia software. Any of those things can be considered open educational resources. And the advantages of OER is that they eliminate cost barriers for a lot of people, especially in higher education. And it's not about money necessarily, it's about improving education. They ideally, in a perfect world, there's some sort of peer review involved, and they give access to high quality, affordable education materials for everyone. And often the only cost is if it's not an electronic delivery, there's some printing costs. So that's why you see the low cost thing in that graph. But they're intended to be free to users. And some considerations for OER. They can support interactive learning in ways that traditional textbooks and guidebooks cannot. They can evolve more quickly over time rather than, and this is a plus and a minus for me because one of my texts you'll see is called the mass media landscape. It'll have references to TikTok, for instance. And so every time something happens with TikTok, I feel like, well, I need to go in and update that in the text and put where we are as of now. And so the good part is it's always up to date. The bad part is you never feel like you're finished, but they can evolve over time if you want them to, rather than the traditional idea of a textbook where you write it and then you have to wait 2 or 3 years and then do another edition. So, in higher education, one of the concerns with OERs is that because they don't have the level of, in some cases, don't have the level of peer review that academic journals do, that the tenure track professors may not benefit from publishing an OER. It may not count toward their progress to tenure. And for a lot of OERs, the peer review process is not as clearly regimented. At the University of Arkansas, we do have an OER librarian who kind of works to make sure everything's meet standard of quality. But for instance, with the ones I've written, I get a grant fund and I hire my own editor. It's not as elaborate as what you'd have as an academic peer review journal. And if you're in the corporate world, I've read about some companies that use OERs for soft skills, but you probably don't want to put, copyright training that involves, your company's expertise. You don't want to put that out for everybody to see. So they're better for things that involve soft skills and probably not, company trade secrets, for example. Um, So what I do in mine is add a lot of interactivity. The one that I've got a screenshot here is of a exercise about advertising. And so if I'm in an on-campus class, I can just say, hey, open up your book, scroll down to this portion of the text, and let's go over this. And you can type in and see how many you get right. We can do it as an exercise in class. For students who are doing it online, it's just incorporated into the text that they're supposed to study. It's just kind of a way to make it a little more engaged. Think about the importance of having a good catchphrase in an advertisement without having a paragraph of text saying that. Um, I use it a lot, both for online and on campus for reflection. For instance, true or false, did Ben Franklin use stories to spread fake news? And the answer, by the way, and they can flip the card and see, okay, this is true, but this is important to make them think rather than just read a paragraph. But I use a lot of flip cards as segues to different thoughts. And the point of this one is to show them, hey, you think fake news started in 2016, but it actually started a long time before that. In fact, we have an American history of fake news. Um, Another thing it does that I like is you can create presentations. Now, this is through a platform that I'll share with you in a little bit called H5P. It's an interactive presentation platform. Um, so I'll give you a little background on what I do in my job. We're growing like crazy, and I hire a lot of people who have never taught before. And it's impossible to just hand them a syllabus, especially for an online class, and say, here's what you're teaching, good luck. So I've spent a lot of time developing these OER materials so that they have a starting point. In some cases, for online classes, we'll hire people and we don't complete the hiring process until we're in the first week of class. Like classes have already started, students are already interacting with the OER content, and the faculty member is just now hired and coming aboard. So we have to have something pre-made for them to teach. They've never taught before. And so I like to give them something that they can latch on to early on. And then, as they get more experience teaching, if they want to start diverging from that, fine. Another advantage of it is that if we have, say, 10 sections of the same course, we can ensure that there's consistency. Like every instructor should be using that as a general guide. There's academic freedom, of course, but as a general guide, they should be using the content from that so we can ensure that everybody's getting roughly the same experience from on-campus or online delivery, and it ensures consistency so that you can't say, oh, well, they're learning something completely different in the online that they are when they're meeting in person. So that's, I think, a huge advantage of it. This one you see right here is an opening presentation about to introduce freshman level to the concept of ethics, and it's in a ethics chapter, but it before we can go over media ethics, we just have to go over ethics in general. So, and I'll run it with you because if you, as you can see, you would click on the bars at the bottom, and it would be almost like handing somebody a PowerPoint presentation that they can use, but it's already published for them. So you've been stranded on a desert island with a billionaire friend. Stormy weather's come. Totally hypothetical, silly thing, but you're going to get rescued. The friend's going to die. The friend says, "Hey, I got a lot of money. I got tons of money. I want to donate it to the Alabama football team." Um, but then after your friend dies and you've given your word to give it to the football team, there's a horrible crisis in Haiti. So this is a segue into what do you do? Do you give the money to Haiti, kind of a utilitarian, what's best for the greatest number of people, or are you good to your word and you give it to the University of Alabama? And so that's the kind of content that we can put, rather than having a big blob of paragraph text, we can put it into this presentation that's a little more maybe user friendly. And it also helps introduce, right after that would be you can embed YouTube videos. The nice thing about YouTube is that if a video is available for public embedding on YouTube, then the copyright concerns are gone. You have permission to use that. It's kind of implied in the fact that somebody put it into YouTube, so you can put YouTube videos into an open educational resource. And so this one that I've got a screenshot of here is kind of an interesting one on whether Batman has an ethical duty to kill Joker or allow Joker to live. And that's a segue from this piece about, utilitarianism to this piece about utilitarianism. And then later they would go into the more media related ethics stuff after we've introduced these concepts. So it also an interactive OER can expand the concept of what we think of reading. For instance, we have some distinguished professionals come on campus. This is a guy, a prize-winning writer from the New York Times and CNN. And so he did some audio for me, and so that way people can, if I'm teaching in class, I can play that audio for students. If students are online, they have the audio there. I can't get him for a guest speaker every semester, but I can have audio available so students can hear directly from him. And then sometimes we can specify that content just for our students, have an Arkansas connection in there. So audio and video can be placed in an OER, in an interactive OER. I use a lot of practice quizzes in my class. So, and these are embedded into the text. So one of the ones I have, and I'll share data with you in a minute, but one of the ones I teach covers grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Not real exciting. I know students aren't going to do a lot of reading in that, but there's a certain like they have, it's almost like, that corporate training for HR, they have to do it, they have to pass it, but they're not going to be really excited about reading it. So I created an OER text that's mostly, quiz yourself, maybe look at some explanations and just keep quizzing yourself so you figure it out. And so this would be an example of how we use that. And this can be done in class or through an online piece. And then sometimes I use it for review questions. For instance, in this case, this is the end of the chapter, and we're wanting to review the key concepts. So in some of these texts, if you looked at them, you'll see, okay, there's a quiz at the end that kind of goes over key concepts. And then may have this on a slide later, but I'll go ahead and share this. In some learning management systems, you can actually play, I do have a slide later, but you can actually place these quizzes into the grading system of the learning management system. I know in Blackboard you can for ours. So what I do with that, for instance, is that couple of things. And I teach a class that has 180 students. So even though I'm in person, I know that we're going to have troubles engaging them just by having a class discussion. It can lead to chaos. Even just a think, pair, share exercise you got to plan a ton of time for that. If everybody shares out, that's the whole period. So, what I've taken to doing is having this open educational resource where we go through, I may go through slides on the chapter, and then at strategic points, I'll say, okay, go in, do this exercise that's in your text, everybody work with those around you, but then we don't have to share out at the end where, I've got, 60, 50, 60 kids that have to share out. And I also do it for the review questions at the end of class where they all do it together. And one of the other things I've done is I let them answer in small groups. This kind of helps avoid the concerns about everybody looking things up on AI. So I just say, hey, you can use AI, and I use a lot of true false questions as well because they can get those are a little trickier for AI to get right 100% of the time. So anyway, that's how I use the interactive portions of that, and I'll show you the platforms or some screenshots of the platforms in a moment. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey on this. When I started, I wrote on figuring out what I was going to do. I did chatbots, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do a whole series of chatbots. And what I found, for instance, in this little thing you see here, is that the stats example. So students were not using the chat bots. They weren't studying with them. And then the day before they took the exam, there was this huge spike, and that was it. Then there was nothing. So I said, well, they're not really studying. They're just using this right before the exam. There's no long-term takeaway here. And it concerned me. And I had a grant for this actually to do this, and it seemed really cutting edge, and everybody's really impressed that they were pretty simple and basic, but that he's building chatbots, he's really thinking forward. But I found that wasn't a very good that idea didn't work as well as I wanted. And so this is not an IRB thing because there's some other factors that were involved as well, but my day of reckoning was in spring 2022. We have a proficiency exam, and we had less than half of our students pass this proficiency exam in grammar, spelling, and punctuation. So it's like, oh no, we've got a problem. So I built this OER text and we adopted it for spring 2020. It was completed by 2023 and in place. And we've improved a little bit since then. In fact, we've improved significantly since then. And this is a fairly large sample size of, 100 to 200 students per semester. Um, so I feel like it worked. Now there's some other, because of the pandemic and impact of the students over time, you can't really say absolutely, yeah, the OER was the only factor, that's the only thing that changed and everything else stayed the same. And look at how effective this was. But on the other hand, I think, oh yeah, well, it couldn't have been a bad idea based on those numbers. So that was the one of the first projects I did and my reason for doing it. I would share with you h5p.org is a good place if you want to play with interactive content that's intended to be an open educational resource. It's a good place to start because you can set a free account and just tinker with it and you can actually publish some. You wouldn't want to do something that's really, really important to you on this, but it's a great place to start playing with at least one platform and seeing what you can do. And then if you get hooked on that, and this is what's happened with me, since I'm sharing my journey, I moved over to h5p.com, which was adopted by our university, and there's a licensing fee involved. So this one, to be clear, is free. This one is not, but this one can be placed if you're using Blackboard or Canvas, things like that. You can set it up within a learning management system. And so there is a significant cost involved for multiple licensing, the various licensing agreements that you can have. But this is when you're serious about it and you want to put it into some sort of curriculum or training over the long haul. And so I just did a quick screenshot. There are tons and tons of more options, but you essentially just say, hey, I want to make a drag the words thing. You click on that and you build it. There's absolutely no coding required. If you want to write a true false question and embed it in there, if you want to put in audio, the course presentation that I showed you, fill in the blanks quizzes, all those kind of things, you just click on what you want to do and you build it. Um, So this is one I really like for our media writing courses because they drag that little, I don't have the whole thing, I don't have it working here, but this is just a screenshot, but they drag that little middle thing and they see what a hard news lead looks like versus a soft news lead. So they still have to read the examples, but it feels like they're more likely to read them when they see it like this in little chunks. And I like to use the analogy when I'm teaching students, our students how to write. We teach them how to write in small paragraphs anyway. So we say, I tell them, a Big Mac is two LB patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. That is for writers who are writing in academic circles. If you're writing for the general public, you want to write in chicken nugget paragraphs where they'll eat one and you give them just enough that they want to eat another. So this is kind of reinforcing that idea and that we're going to write in little chunks and you're going to have very bite-sized pieces of information given to you along the way. So it does reduce thick blocks of paragraph text because long text is a psychological hurdle for a lot of not just students, but readers in general. So it can feel more modern, and especially because we're used to reading online and it's particularly difficult. I find myself sometimes having a hard time reading really long paragraphs online, whereas in a book, I'm more accustomed to that and I can study it more closely. So, as I said earlier, if you put it into a content management system, in this case, H5P, you can add to Blackboard. That's what this is a screenshot of. So I would just pick the chapter that I'm wanting to embed those activities, and I can even go down and just go down to the individual activity level if I want. So it could become standard practice that a lot of if this becomes widely used, that a lot of these activities become embedded into the learning thing. So for instance, if I've got a chapter ending quiz in the OER, maybe that's what students are being graded on, and I'm not even doing a separate evaluation of that within Blackboard. I don't have to write up separate Blackboard questions, for example, in my case. So it's good, but it's not perfect. It does devalue deep reading skills, which bothers some people in academics. I understand that. And it does require connectivity. It eliminates printing costs, but it requires connectivity. People who don't have easy access to the connectivity can run into problems there. Um, so not perfect, but something to consider. So I'm going to do a quick compulsory detour for AI because there are some ways that I've been tinkering with that lately. Um, Blackboard has a something within the LMS that you can create role-playing exercises. But from one of my texts, I've been experimenting with, okay, I'm just going to write some copy and paste text and say, hey, you can copy this into Claude or Chat GPT or whatever you want to do and see how this works for you. And so role playing tends to work better than that. Yeah, I've experimented this one. This is very early in the experimentation, but I've copied this into Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity and think Copilot as well. And it seems to work. I like to do it for role playing because I don't want to do it for information that absolutely has to be 100% correct. But this is just a way in this particular one, you're asking and you have to tell the the AI tool what you want it to be. So that's why I put in red there at the end. You know, or at the start it says, here's who I am, here's you are, and then at the end it says, here's what I need to get out of it. And that seems to make it easier to write prompts that actually fulfill that role-playing thing in an educational manner. Um, I personally use this as an example of how to discuss some other things in class. So, because my class is media related to begin with, we discuss, okay, you're doing this chat, and I, as the instructor, have access to all of your chats. How ethical is it that I can see everything that all of you typed into the chat? And then we also discuss, okay, how much should we trust the next word probability of large language models? Because they're really just making the most likely prediction of what the next word will be. How much value that does that have when it's always giving you the most, some of the more predictable words next? And as a side note, I had this is one that works well that I have embedded in one of the texts that I wrote. But I had it write a poem about my daughter's dog that was adopted, and it's a sweet poem about a dog with a wagging tail and a heart full of need, and his loyalty and love are free, and he's your companion through thick and thin. And we love Harvey, and then we discuss the fact that, okay, how much does it bother you that I wrote that with an AI tool and just did some minor editing, and does that change your attitude toward it? So I think it's a good way to think about how, people want to use AI in the future and the pros and cons of generating text with that. And as an aside, in case you don't know, because some of you probably don't keep up with journalism, but this is a very open debate. And the New York Times is suing OpenAI for copyright infringement, and the Associated Press is partnering with AI, giving them oodles of data of articles, over time, and to make products. So we're really in this odd place that we don't know where this is headed. And if the New York Times were really really successful in this lawsuit, that would create a lot of problems for ChatGPT in particular going forward. But almost all open AI models would not be able to scrape, and they would change their products. So and then, as an FYI, on one of my texts, I actually have some. I went to Scotland last summer, got some audio from some guys who'd written an academic article titled "ChatGPT is Bullshit." There's actually a psychology model research from decades ago that tries to define bullshit. And so I think they have some really good perspective in that we just have to keep in mind that the large language models are simply designed to convey convincing lines of text. And so while they're great and they're productivity tools in a lot of cases, they aren't designed to put truth. They're designed to predict what the next most likely choice of words might be. And so it kind of puts it in perspective. So actually I have some audio in the class in one of the OERs from those guys. And then one thing I've noticed, this is the analytics from one of the OER texts that I published. And what's interesting is that I've got it down at the bottom. You can see, okay, so they're getting scraped. And the one thing about it being open source is that I have no control over whether that's being done accurately or not. I don't know. And these would be not necessarily how many times ChatGPT or Perplexity are using it. This would be how many times people are clicking on the link and going to my project based on some result they see. So I know it's being scraped, probably 99 times for every one number you see there. And it is a thing that by having it being open copyright, why anybody can scrape. I have no control over whether somebody like a person should ideally contact me and say, hey, I'm going to take this and rework it. ChatGPT and Perplexity are doing that essentially without giving me notice that they've done it. And so it's where we are today. I'm not mad about it. It's just kind of interesting because I don't know if the information that they're sourcing back to me is actually done correctly or not, because it's just based on statistical next word probability. So, so I'll kind of start wrapping up here. I've gotten some good online course evaluations that more professors should use this class as a template for teaching online classes. Favorite course I've taken because of the way it was course set up. Love being able to voice opinion based off the material. And then think and explore topics that are often hard to talk about. I think that's the strength of the interactiveness is that it in some ways you can set it up to really think about difficult issues that can be hard to discuss in a classroom out loud. And that was for the online course evaluations, and then for on campus, the interactive format helps me stay more engaged, less boring, makes me forget I'm in school. I can actually read the whole thing without getting majorly bored. His textbook should be the style going forward. I do get a few concerns and more from I'll go back. This is pretty widely, yeah, they like it. This 90% positive. I do get a little bit, or have collected a little bit of, beyond the text is easy to follow. I just like learning with static text. So some people do like text and text only. Um, like static text. I don't want to put the effort of clicking each thing individually. I don't know what to think of that. Every learning takes effort at some point. But I think this last one's true. If I were to read without attending class, I likely wouldn't have watched the videos. I do think some people just read text and aren't going to interact with the things that you spend a lot of time on, but you've got this bigger number of younger users who will probably do the interactives without and avoid the text. So there's some trade-offs. Um, so I've still got a goal to integrate some interactivity there and do more AI exploration. Here are some starting points, and I think I can put these in the chat for you as well, real fast. Um, or if you want to do. Sorry, give me just a minute and I'll put those in the chat as well. So, in conclusion, as I said, we've always been here, and a book I would recommend if you're interested in the history of education technology is called Teaching Machines. It's like largely framed around B.F. Skinner, but it talks about how he was trying to do the very things we're trying to do with scripted AI and with scripted adaptive learning. Many decades ago, almost a century ago, he was already playing with, okay, we're going to eliminate the teacher and we're just going to have somebody in the background and the students are all going to learn at their own pace through teaching machines. It wasn't computers back then. So, and I'm going to skip that one for now. So, are there any questions? I know I've just done a bunch of talking because I haven't done a whole lot of remote things and nobody popped in the chat. But does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Well, feel free to feel free to contact me if you're interested in learning more, and let me know if you need any of the links in this piece or anything. I'd be glad to share them with you. I'd be glad to share a PDF as well. So,
Hey Dave, have you been able to, hey, have you compared classes you've done before the interactive content versus with it and to be able to see if it made a real difference?
Probably the main one I have is I've got that. This one in one particular class is, yeah, we definitely did better with the proficiency. This is a course that we offer, and then at the 10-week mark, students would take the exam. And so we got about a 20 to 25% bump there, 24% bump. And it seems to be getting better. Um, but not this one is because it involves a more of a multiple choice exam. It's easier to measure. Some of the conceptual pieces is a little harder to you're just looking at grades and there's a lot more variables. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was interesting, the comment from one student about they prefer reading the text. And I wonder if that students probably that's all they've ever encountered in any of their courses ever, is just text at them and they memorize
I do think that's something, and I do think that I look at my own. Sometimes I read the script of podcasts rather than listen to them because it seems to go faster. So whenever possible, I do include like for videos and audio, I include a transcript, which you should do anyway. But some people do prefer to read, and taking that into consideration, yeah.
it. Have any other questions? I don't know if you noticed, Dave, we have Emily who's been driving and listening to this.
Ah, okay. Very
Hi,
cool.
Emily. Yeah, I'm glad you haven't crashed or anything. No, no, I don't want to distract you, Emily. You pay attention to the road.
All right.
No. Ah, taking the kids in daycare. Oh boy. Okay, well, Dave, hey, thank you. This is
Enjoyed it. Thank y'all very much. And feel free to contact me if you have questions.
oh, good. Now, are you gonna do a woo pig suey?
I can't. I will do that for you. How's that? Can you see me okay back here? Woo pig, see. I won't do it all three times, but there you go.
Uh, yeah, both times went to the Walmart Saturday morning. They did the Walmart cheer, and then since we were there, then they had everybody do the woo pig suey too. It was crazy.
It takes practice, I guess.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Hope to see people at the top of the hour. Dave, you have a great day.
All right.
And
Thank you very much.
hey, next time in Fayetteville, I might drop by.
All right. Thanks.